right, and we have people coming in, and I see some people with their camera on. We absolutely love that. Welcome everyone. Welcome Dan, of course. I hope you're doing all right.
Doing well, yeah, thanks.
That's good to hear. Vitaly, who is hosting this, is coming. Like a proper professional, he has to restart his machine because nothing but the best is good enough for Dan Mol, and a working computer is like one of those things which is kind of necessary to make this work. So until that time, you're going to have to do with my rambling a little bit. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Just you saying that makes me think like maybe I should have restarted my computer before doing this. So hopefully we're doing all right. It's starting to crawl a little bit, but hopefully we should be okay.
Yeah. For me, your connection has been very, very stable.
Okay.
But yeah, you never know. And I'm in the deep woods in the Netherlands, and I know everyone's gonna say, oh, the Netherlands is too small to have deep woods. Well, it is actually quite remote here. I think our nearest neighbors are at like 400, 500 meters. So it's a thing, and it's cold.
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah. Pros and cons.
Close to my neighbors. I don't like being close to my neighbors. I would rather have space.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I normally live in Hong Kong, where I think probably has the highest density of people living anywhere in the world. So
I didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah. It's just skyscrapers, really a lot of skyscrapers, and then there's also nature. So it is quite amazing, but usually living space is small and pretty cramped, and also not very cheap. So I remember my first house there was a 350 square foot apartment for $2,500 US.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
it's like San Francisco prices.
It is at that moment. It was the most pricey in the world, and I think now San Francisco and New York have gone. So, and where you're based, is it a little bit more normal still, or is it going crazy as well?
It's I live just outside of Philadelphia, and so it is very reasonable. And my wife and I moved from Brooklyn, and at the time it was expensive but reasonable. I'm glad we moved when we did, because we have way more space for much less than we were paying when we lived in New York.
Yeah.
And I've heard, in the last 10 years, it has risen exorbitantly too. So I'm happy where I am from both a space and a price standpoint.
I believe that. Brooklyn in a way sounds like a dream, and I know I always love it when I'm there, but I can also imagine at some point it's a bit much.
Totally. I miss it a lot. The food is amazing. But living in Philly, it's not far. It's not a far drive. It's like hour and a half on a good day. On a bad day, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Okay.
So easy enough to visit, and then easy enough to leave also. And also, we just had our first kid when we lived in Brooklyn. And so just raising kids in a really tiny apartment, that was tough too, without family nearby. So, there was a lot of good reasons to move.
Yeah. And when was that roughly?
That was 2012. So yeah, my daughter was born in 2011. We moved when she was 6 months old. So 2012. So I've been in Philly, back in Philly for the last 10 years.
You're only 29 though, Dan. So how's that possible?
19. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's
I've got a bunch of grays. I'm not fooling anybody.
Yeah, same here. I'm trying to hide them from the light, but it's not really working, and I see people laughing, so it's definitely not working. All right, Vitaly is taking a long time, so I'm sure he has a very old MacBook. So maybe we just start with the question that he always ends with. So I'm kind of mowing it away from him. What are the things that you are most excited about?
Oh boy. I get excited about a lot of things, so it's a tough question. Right now, I am most excited. I guess this is a constant thing too. I like learning things. I like doing new things, especially one of the things I love about working in tech. There's stuff to not love about working in tech. There are a few things to love. What I love about it is that we can try things without a lot of risk. We could upload something to a web server, and then if it doesn't work, we can re-upload it, and that, like, for most things that we're doing, it does, very little impact. So I like being in this field because there's always stuff to learn. right now, it's super nerdy, but I'm learning about marketing automation that it's a thing that I've heard about. I've never really pursued it much or tried to learn much about it. I'm learning a ton right now and just doing a bunch of experiments in that. I'm messing up a bunch of stuff in learning, but that's part of how I'm learning. I just created an email course about design systems, and one of the days I sent one of the lessons to everyone on my mailing list as opposed to just the people who paid for it. So, stuff like that, just messing up, and I had to send an
And all of a
apology
sudden
email
you
being
made
like,
so
sorry.
you made so many new friends.
Yes, maybe it's a good marketing technique if I would have done it on purpose. I don't know. But so I'm learning a lot by messing up. I'm learning a lot by reading. I'm excited generally about the fact that there's just a lot of stuff on the internet that you can learn from for free. So that's really getting me right now. I love that.
Nice. And if you're like, now you're saying you're doing stuff in marketing automation, are you doing that for yourself, or are you doing that for a client? Is that something you're just generally interested in, or how does that work for you?
It's a little bit of all of those things. So I started by doing it for myself because I think one of the things that I'm trying to do right now that is new for me is I'm trying to build a very boring business. I've always worked in and for very interesting businesses that are very complex, which is cool. And I'm like, I wonder what it would be like to automate all the things and just have everything on autopilot. I've seen a lot of benefit from that with things like my bank account, like putting money in savings automatically every month. I don't have to touch it. I don't have to see it. And then you wake up a couple of years later and you're like, hey, I have a bunch of money in here. That's really nice. So that principle, trying to apply it to design and engineering and tech and all that stuff. I'm like, there's probably some good benefit in that. So just trying to figure that out on my own. And I don't know, maybe one day I'll do it for clients. But right now it's just fun to figure out for me.
But isn't that how it usually kind of starts? I mean, I think it's both ways, right? Sometimes your client has a question and you dive into it, and then that's you learn the hard way, but then you can kind of not screw up too much.
Exactly. The stakes are high when somebody's paying you to do it. If you're doing it on your own, you can create your own stakes, you can create your own pressure, but no one's going to die if you mess up. So, there's always that safety net.
No, that's definitely one of the nice things. And it's always, how far out of your comfort zone are you willing to go to do it? So I've dabbled a little bit in marketing automation, but I've generally kind of, maybe I'm old school or just old. There's a lot of stuff where I think, I like custom stuff. And even at Smashing, there's some stuff is automated, but we kind of make all the EDMs ourselves. Of course, we have a template, and we have MailChimp, but a lot of it is manual. And then people say, you should be using this tool and that tool to make it better. I'm like, yeah, maybe you're right, but I feel like I'm getting to be one of these oldies. I kind of do it this way, and I like it this way.
I mean, I'm that way too. I much prefer to do most things the long, hard, stupid way. Right. But I guess I've just realized that there's just too many things to do manually. So, especially nowadays, especially lately, there's AI bots and automation bots and all this kind of stuff. And, I'm like, well, let me ask the robots to help at least some of those things, because I can't do everything on my own. So I wonder what role they play in the future of this work and, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic, because I don't know very much about it, but I'm following a couple of newsletters who are talking, for example, about AI generated design. And I've always thought, seeing is believing, but I'm seeing some stuff which is, it's pretty out there, and definitely, some of the, especially design systems work where you of course are involved as well. There's a lot of stuff which seemingly is quite nice and quite okay, this actually can save a lot of time, and it's not just the tokens, it's the whole structure and the whole process in there as well, right?
Totally. I am very optimistic about it. I'm not the kind of person who thinks oh man, our jobs are in jeopardy because the robots are going to come take it all from us. I'm sort of optimistic about it, in that I'm like, yeah, I do hope that the robots come and take it from us, the boring stuff, the stuff that I don't want to do, the stuff that we don't want to do, the stuff that we don't have to do. And so now, even though it's very early, at least early in the public eye, as a lot of these things are getting more traction, already I'm like, there is AI that is part of my workflow right now. Already today, it's just part of my design process to use generators to use things to start me off on things. So like already I'm a believer. I don't know where it's going to go. I definitely see that there is ethical and moral implications of that I think are really important. And then and in addition to that, I think that they have a role in our worlds, and it remains to be seen what that role actually is. But I choose to be cautiously optimistic about it, I guess is the right phrase.
Yeah, no, that's, but again, that's always a struggle, right? Because I mean, it's going that way anyway. So you want to be, you want to know how it works and be involved with it. At the same point, there's risk involved which you cannot close your eyes to. For some of the stuff like marketing automation, I actually think the ethical implications can be quite big. Sure. For AI generated design, I don't know. I have not thought about it that much, but my first gut feeling is maybe a little bit less in terms of privacy. I don't know, but yeah, definitely interesting. We as soon as Vitaly enters, we need to give him an applause, because he must be, you know, I know him a little bit. He'll be in his apartment, you know, swearing at his computer.
Yeah, no worries. I've had that situation before where I'm like, I am supposed to be on a thing and my computer just won't start up. So I have a lot of empathy for that situation. I've in that position, I've been like sweating and nervous and anxious and all that stuff. So no worries about that at all.
Good. What's because we started off with kind of what are you excited about? So let's maybe reverse that question. So what are you scared for?
Wait, what am I scared of?
What are you scared of? What are you like, if you look at 2023, what could be, I mean, and I'm not talking about like, you know, world wars or anything, because then we can be here forever, but in terms of, you know, what's happening in our world, what are the things that you could see happening which you think, I hope we can stay away from that and move away from that?
I mean, I think like many humans tend to be scared of the stuff that I can't control. You know, and perhaps that's just a perception thing, you know, that we have, that like maybe we're not in control of anything, but the things that we perceive we're in control of are the things that give us comfort. So all the big factors, I think, you know, there's talk of recession, you know, globally. There's talk of, you know, there's tons, especially in tech. We see a ton of layoffs recently, especially from some of the big tech companies out there. Like, I think that we have not seen the ramifications of it yet, because it's all still happening. So we don't even know what effects they have. So I think it's all of that stuff going, like, am I going to be able to feed my family, you know, in the next 2 years? I think so. I hope so. I don't see any signs that say I'm not going to be able to, but there are things happening in the world that I'm like, I wonder how this will affect, you know, and as I look, the thing that gives me confidence is that as I look back over, you know, the periods of like 2008 and the other recessions in recent history, a lot of those things have had meaningful impact in negative ways, you know, on people. In general, in tech, a lot of tech companies were actually not hurt by that in the way that the housing market was, or things like that. So as I look at those, I'm like, maybe we're immune from that stuff. I don't know. I've never really been a good fortune teller, but those are the things that kind of worry me. I try not to focus too much on them, because otherwise I'll get all, you know, existential dread about it. But I think those are things that are sort of like always looming, that I'm like, I wonder what we need to do about this. I wonder how far in advance we need to plan for some of this stuff. I like having plan Bs generally. I don't quite have a plan B for that, other than like my plan B has always been, you know, if this tech thing doesn't work out, I'll drive for FedEx, you know, I'll manage a Burger King. You know, like those are always options for me. And like, you know, my wife and I talk about those things all the time. I'm like, you know, I feel like I'm always 30 days away from filling out an application at Burger King, because if that's what I need to do, that's what I need to do. You know, so hopefully it doesn't come to that. I don't think I would like to work at Burger King, but if I had to, then I would.
I would definitely order a Whopper from you, man. I mean, that's like, I can definitely, I can also see, you know, the 16-year-old Dan Mole, you know, I don't know. Were you a little bit of an awkward kid like me, or were you confident and cool?
No. So I was always small for my age. I was a late bloomer. One of my first jobs was I worked at McDonald's, and I worked there for 2 weeks. And the way that I quit McDonald's was, I remember one day I was working the breakfast shift, and I had to bring a whole tub of orange juice from the back of the kitchen to the front. And like a idiot, I was holding this big tub by the lid, not by the handles. And so as I was walking to the front, and I was 14, I was probably 85 pounds, right? So like that, I can barely pick up this thing full of orange juice. And I was holding it by the lid, and the lid popped off, of course, because I was holding it. And I spilled orange juice everywhere, all over the floor, in the kitchen area, in the restaurant area. And I was so embarrassed. I just walked out. And I never went back because I was in walking distance from my house. So I just walked home. And I never went back. I never collected my pay. I was just so embarrassed about it. So technically, to this day, I still might be an employee.
You're employed. I mean,
I might still have a paycheck waiting for me.
You've got a paycheck. You've got employment benefits. You've got a massive pension there waiting for you, man.
I'll tell you what. I mean, I worked there when I was 14, and I'm 19 now, so I've got at least 5 years of benefits that have accrued. So maybe that's my plan B. I don't know.
And given the amount of money they pay, I mean, you might as well quit. So
I could have dozens of dollars by now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who needs design systems? If you can do some burger flipping. Was that your first job, or was that your?
That might have been my that was my first official job.
Okay.
Actually, it might have been my second official job. I had, a bunch of like under the table jobs working for my dad had a friend who used to run personal care homes. So I used to drive around some of the patients or drive and pick up stuff, and he would pay me, under the table. But I think McDonald's was my first, legal, reporting to the government, taking taxes out kind of job.
And when did you ever do anything like in design or technology already when you're young, or?
Oh yeah. So like I started very young in my career, and I like to say, the first time I ever built a website, it was for my church, and they paid me $15.
Nice.
So like from the first website I ever built, I think I was in 8th grade, 7th grade, I don't know, something like that. So from the first website I ever built, I was a professional web designer. I had no idea what I was doing, but hey, I got paid, and I delivered.
Did it have a counter of how many visitors you had?
Oh, no, it didn't have a count, because I built it all from scratch in front page. I didn't know how to use like plugins or, or like JavaScript widgets or anything like that at the time. So it was like, I designed it in, I forget if it was Photoshop or ImageReady, sliced it up and then put it back together in a couple of tables, and, and figured out how to upload it into, I think it was an Angel Fire server or GeoCities server, something like that, somewhere where we had free web space. And that was that.
And you got paid the massive amount of $15.
And I got paid.
Yeah. But it was for your church, so you got a lot of karma or whatever you call it.
And like not only was it for my church, but it was for the homeless ministry at my church. So it was like karma points out, all over the place. And it actually had a lot of impact. Like we saw a bunch of people like contacting through that website because it was new, and it was like a big thing for our church because it like made us more like technologically savvy than some of the other churches in the area. So it did have a lot of big impact, even though it was just like a small landing screen. That I made, and I think that if I remember correctly, the dimensions were like 640 by 480. That was the website dimensions for it. So it was fun. I learned a lot doing that. It was the Wild West.
Do you think then that we should be returning back to 640 times 480?
Absolutely. I mean, it's mobile first, right? Essentially, we're almost there again.
Isn't it? It's almost like sub-mobile first now.
It's true. You're right.
Yeah. Sorry for jumping in so randomly, everyone.
No worries. Good to see you, Vitaly.
Oh, it's my pleasure to see you then. I had this massive internet outage issues here, so I couldn't do anything. And with my phone, like my mobile phone has like 1 out of 4 those things on the phone, and it's like I'm going to let them down. But no, Jarijn came in and saved the world as always.
As always, yep.
I do have to.
They say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So as long as we end this well, we're golden.
Well, excellent. We have plenty of questions prepared. I just don't know what we have done so far. So maybe
we've chatted about life, about things he's excited about and a little bit worried about. And we've covered the fantastically, massively important job of finding out what was his first job outside of tech and the first job inside of tech. So we haven't touched any of the design systems or kind of any of the stuff that you actually need to have some knowledge about. So that's not me, so that's you.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to take over from here. That's for now. I think that the internet connection is more or less stable. Dan, design systems, huh? Still a
Yeah,
thing, I heard.
apparently.
Yeah, you spend so much time and effort working around design systems, and I'm wondering at this point, do you think that it's already kind of resolved? Do we have by the way, it's not just going to us talking. I'm very, very hopeful to get some questions in the chat, so feel free to bring up everything. We have 27 questions prepared, but they don't matter as much as your questions do. But then the first question I do have for you is, we are living almost in 2023. It feels like a future. Does it feel like a future to you? Maybe a little bit.
Definitely. It definitely feels like a future. Yes.
Yes. So why are we still having conversations about how to maintain a design system? Haven't we figured it out yet in the last 10 years?
Gosh, I hope not. I would be out of business if we did. No.
But you have your wonderful video courses and your training material that will help people get there, right?
I hope so.
So why do you think people struggle so much still? Why haven't we figured it out yet properly?
I think it's still relatively new. So I think it's interesting in tech. We have this like weird conundrum where things move really fast and really slow at the same time. Like it's very odd. I think at some point, design systems are the way we're going to make things, in the same way that like the way we make things right now is we use CSS. Like we don't argue about that anymore, but we do argue about the details, about the implementation, right? We argue about, and argue is a strong word, but like, should I build this thing with Flexbox or with Grid? Like technically you could do with both or either, or, whichever one you want. You could flip a coin. There's not really a right answer to it, but we still talk about it anyway, because I think it's worthwhile. So I think design systems are not far off on that. Same thing with responsive design. Like you can go very technical with responsive design. It is a combination of the three things that Ethan Marcotte originally put forward, which is it's flexible images, it's flexible grids, it's media queries. But also you could think of responsive design as a methodology or philosophy or an approach, and in which case it encompasses a lot of different things. So I think design systems are sort of the same thing. And I've changed my tune on it a lot over the last couple of years. I used to be very vigilant about, these are the things that are a design system, and this is what is not a design system. And, and then I just realized how like gatekeepy that was, over time. And now the way that I talk about design system with people is like, I've kind of classified 6 different kinds of design systems, and like, it's fine. Any of them could be design systems. It's important that we agree on which one we're working on right now. So if you and I are working on a design system, well, let's pick the one so that we at least have some shared language and shared vocabulary around it. And that's not to say that those other types are not design systems. They're just not the things that we're doing right now. And I found that to be a much more helpful approach when I'm working with folks about design systems.
Right. We have wonderful, wonderful people in here. We have Tia, we have Masha here as well. All the familiar faces. That's incredible. Do you, dear friends, have some issues? Around design systems, any questions that you would like to ask? You can feel free to ask on the microphone or write in the chat as you wish. Otherwise, I'd be happy to proceed. But again, this is your hour to ask questions that you have. Maybe anybody wants to jump in? No, not yet. That's okay. Feel free to also write in the chat. Because for me, I think one of the really interesting conversations that I keep having all the time, and it's all related to all those little things. It seems like very often we just get lost in those little things. For example, one question that comes up quite a lot, how do we okay, well, first of all, there is a question that came up in the chat, so I'm going to prioritize that one, of course. So Sutik is wondering, dear Dan, can you elaborate on the 6 types of design systems you mentioned?
I should have seen that one coming. I should have had my notes handy. I will try to recite them off the top of my head. I have them written down. I have a video coming out about it soon and a blog post coming about it soon. So it's top of mind. It's just not right here, but we'll see. We'll see what I can recall. Design system type number 1 is usually a brand identity or visual language system. Yeah, that's right. The pressure. Yep, there's pressure now. We'll see. Like brand identities, visual languages, those are a kind of design system, right? And I should define what's difficult about this in general is that the word design is very broad and the word system is very broad. So when you put them together, design system could mean anything. So in terms of tech, in terms of software, in terms of what we do, design system as a brand language, that is one kind of system. Systems are things that are connected. So a visual language and a brand language can be connected to an organization, to a brand, to an execution. That's one kind. Another kind of design system are design system as tools. So you can think of things like UI kits, component libraries. Those are kinds of design systems because they are connected within themselves, sometimes not to things outside themselves, but within themselves, they are connected. So you can consider those a system. So UI kits and component libraries are design systems too. The third kind, I know I'm going to forget one, so we'll see. I might only come up with 5. The third one is a design system as a product, right? So if you think about, I don't remember what the other one is, before product, design system as a project, right? So some companies go like, well, we're going to do a project. This happens a lot at agencies too, where with agencies, you're designing things for multiple clients, and then your boss or your manager or you might figure out like, well, if we could just carve off a week, we could do a project where we create a design system, a set of templates, some boilerplates, you know, something, starter files that we could then reuse every time we work with a new client or a new product or something like that. So design system as a project that has a start date and an end date and a deliverable, you know, those are design systems too. They don't have some of the qualities or some of the inputs and outputs that other kinds of design systems do, but that's one. So that's type number 3. So far we've got, let me recap, brand language, visual identity. We've got design system as tools. We've got design system as projects. And then the next thing here is a design system as a product. So that could be elevated from a project to something that never has a deadline. We're always working on it, you know, in the same way that Google Docs is a product. Like they're never stopped. The team there never stops working on Google Docs. There's always improvements to make. And some of the things that get lumped in with the product is it's got a roadmap. It's got a team dedicated to it. It probably has a budget allocated to it to hire people and salaries of staff members. So product, I forget if I said roadmap, you know, most products have roadmaps to them as well. So you can think of a design system as a product that is ongoing forever for the life of an organization. So that's 4. Number 5 is you could think of a design system as a service. So lots of companies that I work with, their design system team is actually sort of like an internal agency that you could hire to then do design work for you, right? So that's a kind of system. That's a way of doing design within a given space, right? So that can be considered a design system as well. And the last one, the one that I think is probably the most mature, it's hard to get to this level. It sort of combines a bunch of these two, is I talk about this a lot lately. I'm writing a book about it called Design Systems Are a Practice. So it is creating a product, but it is using that product over time and developing the habits and the rituals and the culture that go around that product as well. So I think I got the 6. Let me just recap. Design system as visual identity, brand language, design system as tool, design system as project, design system as product, design system as service, design system as practice. Yep,
you must be dreaming in design systems at this point, then, don't you?
It's true. I think about them a lot.
Yeah. One question that did came up. Well, you see the result of clapping coming from Jarijn. There's also a question from Jarijn, but maybe before jumping there, one thing that I always struggle with as well is it seems like very different teams really understand design systems is a very different thing, right? And so what I see a lot is that very often it would be just a bunch of components, right? And on the other hand, it would be like this fully fledged thing, which is kind of like a product that you mentioned as well. And very often it's kind of a mix and combination. But I think for me personally, the major part, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a major part of this design system practice would be really is the alignment between teams. I think that this is really the thing that really helps, even if the design system gets, I don't know, dies, like your graveyard that you're mentioning quite often. But that exercise of just going through the components that we're using, naming those components more or less, and just improving this overall alignment is the one thing that really helps. So maybe you could share a few tips of what you think would be a really great way to establish stronger alignment between teams. Is it just enough to, have a beautiful workshop, pick up all the components, run the nomenclature about that, name them, put them in a PDF, no, hopefully not a PDF, and call it a day? Or we need to do a bit more than that? What would be some really important things to do to ensure that the alignment is still there a year after the design system exercise?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is super important, because what makes something a system and what makes something not a system is whether or not there are connections involved, right? So if the teams aren't connected to each other, well, you don't have a system. If they're working separately, you don't have a system. If one team is using a UI kit and another team is using a component library, and the things in the UI kit are not the same things in the component library, they're not connected, not a system yet. It's when you connect those two, however, or when you connect all the parts, that's how they become a system. And so the things that you're talking about is one of the things that I think design system teams are very guilty of. And I try to dissuade teams from doing this as early as possible before it gets ingrained, before it becomes a practice and actually a toxic practice, is the idea that design system teams, they like to be the creators of things a lot of times. They like to go, we're going to establish the standards. And I'm like, nope. Amy Hoop has a really great talk where she talks about the fact that even before you have a design system, there are likely systems that already exist in your organization. So instead of trying to go, we're going to create the first system, instead recognize that there already is a system in place. It might be a bad system, it might be an inefficient system, but it's there. And so if you can connect to those things, it actually is better for the culture of your organization. So an example of that, a practical example of that is a lot of design system teams will go like, we're going to define our principles. That's our first thing we're going to do. It's like, cool, good idea. Why not use the principles of your whole company though? Like, could your design system principles be the principles of the company? And that's the thing that some design system teams are like, well, yeah, of course. And then others are like, oh, that didn't even occur to us. And so one of the first steps that I generally suggest is like, let's take the mission statement of the company and figure out how the design system will drive the mission forward. You know, maybe not now, maybe not in this first week, but 3 months from now, what could we do that would help the design system, that would help the company's mission move forward? Because then you're connecting your design system to the mission of the company. And that practice has to be reinforced. If that's not a workshop, or at least it's not a one-time workshop, we might have to run that workshop every 3 months. And remember, everybody, we're tying this to the vision of the company, to the mission of the company, to the OKRs of the company, whatever the metrics are, whatever ways, you know, your manifestos or whatever you have that drives the company forward. Connect your design system to that thing, because then you'll always be in sync. And again, that's the practice part. Is practice basically just means doing something over and over again. So if we do, you know, there's no one-time alignment. You know, it's the same way that your car, you have to get your tires aligned every so often, because otherwise they just get out of alignment just from driving. You know, like that. And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to support your car, and then you're supposed to get it tuned up. And so the same thing with alignment sessions. I think you need tune-ups every 6 months or every 3 months or every quarter or every year, you know, some interval to keep that practice going.
Makes sense. Plenty of questions in here from my end, but one question that came from Jarijn as well. How do you feel about customizing an existing design system like material, etc., versus starting from scratch? I know you have opinions on that, so let's hear it.
Yeah. So in these kind of Q&As, I try to do my best to not say it depends, because like I find that that's like true, but usually not a helpful answer. So instead, I'm going to try to say what things like that depend on. My general answer to customizing existing design systems, and I think it's a fine approach. What I've seen is if you want your design system to last more than 3 years, build it from scratch. If you are fine with it lasting 2 years and then you know you have to refactor or do some stuff, then yeah, build on Material, build on Bootstrap, build on AntDesign, build on, you know, there are a lot of really good design systems out there. They're just not made for your use cases. They're made for general use cases. So what I find is after 2 or 3 years, that's when teams start to fight the system, where they go like they're actually removing more things from it than they are using it in the first place. Before that 2-year mark, there's a lot of utility in a lot of systems like that. So my general guideline there is, you know, if it has to last more than 3 years, it's probably worth the effort to create from scratch. If you're a startup and you just need to get up and running, by all means, material design it. You know, like that design system is excellent. It's been worked on for a decade. You know, the people who work on it are super duper smart. They just didn't make it for you. You know, how could they? They don't know you, right? So they made it for a general purpose. And so it's only going to be generally applicable. The more you use a design system over time and you start to find more and more specific use cases, I think that's where you'll find that you'll start to outgrow that, you know, retrofit design system that you built on top of.
Yeah. I think that many of my colleagues, at least for sure, are not quite certain about the tooling, and there is always this question about tooling that comes up, and I know that you also have very strong opinions about Zeppelin and things like that, and so I do want to ask you, maybe at this point, we've always been talking, I think like every single talk about design systems at some point eventually talks about the gap and bridging the gap. right? And the workflow between design and development. I know that you have the potato process, and maybe it could be useful to elaborate on that as well. But in general, if you were thinking about, from your perspective, about the best workflow that you have noticed or have seen working really well between teams who are in some way or the other are working on sort of a design system, what would be some good attributes and some warning signs that you often find in the collaboration? That would be the first question, I guess. And the second, maybe I can actually come back to it later. Like,
Okay.
what would be the best way to organize it tool-wise?
Okay, so the best technique from a process standpoint, and then I'll talk about tools that help support this. To me, is just sitting together. It's really simple. It's I know kind of before you joined Vitaly, we were talking about being like, old school web designers, just doing things the long, hard, stupid way. And I still think there's a lot of value in some of that, which is like sitting together and working on the same thing at the same time is sometimes clumsy, but it's really collaborative. We don't have tools that support that. I think that's part of the problem is we don't have a lot of tools that allow a designer and an engineer to work on the same thing at the same time. And this is back to a question that you asked a few minutes ago. Like, this is an example of how our industry moves so slowly. We have been building websites now for 20 years, 30 years, and we still have a designer goes and works in a design tool, and then an engineer basically rebuilds the same thing in an engineering tool. Like, how silly is that? And what I'm encouraged by is that now, like in the last 3 years, 5 years, there is tooling that seems to actually be able to solve this problem, or at least prototypes of that tooling that help solve that problem, that understand that designers and engineers are really manipulating the same material, just in different ways. Like the fact that Figma is an Electron app, and it's not built on Canvas or WebKit or something like that. Like, I think that's part of the stuff that creates a divide between designers and engineers, is we're literally working on different materials. Designers are working in binary essentially, and engineers are writing compiled code or if you're talking about apps or real-time code. Like, so I think that the tooling is starting to converge, but again, really, really slowly. But I think it's predicated on the fact that our cultures are designed to keep us separate. A designer, go and do this stuff for a couple of weeks, get it approved, make PDFs, make PNGs, and then engineering starts. And so, to the question that you asked, what are some of the pitfalls? Whenever I see teams start to drift apart, whenever I see somebody go like, all right, let me go away for a little while and do this thing, it's like, that's a potential risk. There's some value to that, but I'll give a more extreme example. One of the things that I've seen lead to design system graveyards and design system ghost towns, which what I mean by that is a design system that no one uses, a design system that's amazing, it's well built, it's beautiful, no one lives there, like no one uses it. Where those generally come from is when a team goes, we're going to have an offsite for a week, and we're going to go away, and we're going to design some components, and we're going to design a Figma UI kit, and we're going to design all these things in a vacuum, and we're going to come back and then give it to the rest of the organization, and that's going to be our amazing, objectively good design system. I've never seen that work because you predicated that whole exercise on literally disconnecting from everyone else. You are doing the opposite of what a system is. Instead of connecting to parts, you are disconnecting from parts, and then crossing your fingers and hoping you can reconnect to it. There's no plan. It's just a wish. So when I'm sitting in, even though it's small, when I'm sitting in a working session between a designer and engineer, and the designer goes, all right, let me go off for a day and design. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I know it's awkward. I know it's weird, but literally sit here and let us watch you design. Same thing with the engineer. All right, let me go away because I need to think about this stuff. I know that you do. People need think time. I'm not saying that we don't, but there's something that's really good about doing that thinking in public, doing that work in public, even if in public means just with one of your colleagues and one of your coworkers. So that's the thing that I think it's built on, is that simple collaboration of designer and engineer working on something at the same time is really important. I want tools that help us do that. I want designers to be able to manipulate React components in a GUI. I want engineers to be able to write code in Figma. Like, until we have things that do that, it is going to remain separate for a while. It is also a huge technical challenge. So I don't know how to solve that. That's a big, I'm not saying like it's easy. It's hard. Somebody smart needs to figure it out, So it is a difficult problem, but like we've solved other problems in tech before. Like, why not solve this one? And I'm encouraged. I'm just this week, I talked to a team that's building a new tool that I'm like, oh, this could be it, and I've had maybe 5 of those conversations in the last 5 weeks. So it's like, I'm really encouraged by seeing this. They're all in early stages. So I'm like, 5 years from now, maybe we'll be at a point where, Figma is not a designer's tool, or, Visual Studio is not an engineer's tool, but there's some tools that we all can work in at the same time.
Well, but looking at the 5 years from now, who knows what's going to happen 5 years from now? Will we all be kind of just consuming the design system by asking GPT, right? This is called.
Gosh, I hope
GPT
so.
just hey, I need an accordion over there. Can you do that for me? It's like, sure, done. Would that be nice? A kind of some sort of a design assistant tool like that, making that happen.
Well, I think that the important, to me, what's so exciting about ChatGPT and AI and all this stuff is it models how we're supposed to work with each other. Like, if we have a design system, there's nothing wrong, or there's no reason why I, as a designer, couldn't sit with my engineer and treat my engineer politely like ChatGPT. Hey, what if we made a website that had a header at the top, some cards right below that, a hero right below that, and then a footer at the bottom? And they would go, all right, give me 1 sec. And that literally 4 things on the page is 4 includes, right? From the design system. It's 4 lines of code potentially. ChatGPT could do it. Why can't my engineer do it? Same thing with an engineer doing that with a designer. Hey, what if we designed something that had a header bar up top, but the search bar kind of dropped down below it? Okay, let me drag from my Figma library. It takes 30 seconds of work. Like, that's what design systems are supposed to enable for us. So what I like about working with ChatGPT and tools like it is it actually allows us to model the workflow that we want, but the tooling has to be there. ChatGPT has a ton of tooling in the background that it's pulling from. It has original sources that it's pulling from to remix and to combine. Isn't that what a design system is? It's that too. Why can't people do that? And actually, why can't people do that in a better way than ChatGPT? ChatGPT gets a tons of things wrong too. Sure. And so in a way that right now, people don't get it wrong as much. So like, why can't we work that way? And I think part of it is because we don't have the fodder in the right tools and in the right containers to be able to do that as fast as a bot could.
Yeah. There was one question that came up as well, and I thought that it might be a good idea to bring it up. Mary P is wondering, but what if you are the designer and the developer? I find it hard to not separate the 2 processes.
Yes, perfect. Because that's how a designer and a developer have to work, as one, as if you were one person who could design. And like, if you talk to somebody who is I don't know all the terms that are coming out, UI engineer, pixel engineer, UX engineer, design technologist, creative developer, like those all kind of mean the same thing. It means a designer who can code or an engineer who can design, like somebody who can do both of those things. If you watch how that kind of person generally works, they are not separate processes. You do a little design, you do a little engineering, you do a little design, you do a little, like you do it. And that's the hot potato process. The hot potato process is you take a piece of work and you pass it back and forth between designer, engineer in very small increments, like a game of hot potato. In a game of hot potato, you only hold the potato for as little time as you can before you pass it to somebody else. You hold it too long, you lose. Right. But that's what happens in our design process and in our build process is designers work on a thing for 6 weeks. And then it goes to engineering, and engineering has to work on it for 12 weeks. You know what could happen in a span of an 18-week project? Like everything. So that's it's the opposite of hot potato. You're holding it too long. And so instead, if we just held it a little bit shorter, in less, more frequent bursts, but less amount of time, we would work more like a design engineer works, or like a UI engineer works, or a creative technologist work. Little bits, a little bit of design, a little bit of engineering, a little bit of design, a little bit of engineering, and all of the stages then become ideation. Right? At every stage, you're free to go, oh, what if we did this? But if you do it waterfall, well, hey, the designer worked on this for 4 weeks. The engineer better not say in week 8, hey, what if we did this? No. Designer worked for 4 weeks on this. We can't touch this anymore. And that's just a symptom of a broken process. So I think the less sacred we are about it, the more we can pass work and ideas back and forth more frequently in smaller chunks. Isn't that the spirit of Agile anyway? Like, aren't we working in a more agile fashion? So like all of this stuff works together, but we need to change our mindset about how work generally flows.
Okay. Sanjay is wondering, also on top of that, would you recommend that we build design systems incrementally and not all at once?
100%. Yes. This is the thing, like it's such a simple idea, but this is the thing that when I go and consult with these giant companies, they go, all right, we want we're going to spend the next year building 100 components and in design and in code, and then the beginning of 2025 we will release it to the company. Well, why would we do that? Why don't we just build one component this week? Isn't that the point of MVPing something? Like, do it in small chunks so that you can learn stuff. It's so odd to me. I'm trying not to be bitter about this, but it's getting to that point where
as I know you're very optimistic and very hopeful for the better in the world.
I'm trying to hold it. I'm trying to hold that, because that's how we treat every product, every other product that we make, especially for our customers and consumers. We do it that way. What's the first thing you focus on? Not brand, product market fit. Okay, so we go and build something really small in MVP and we go test it with users and we get feedback. So why would we spend 6 months building components in a vacuum without getting any feedback from the users of the system? It's so bananas to me. Like, why the things that have made our product successful, why don't we take that same approach to working on design system? And that's why when people say like, design system is a product, I'm like, I don't think you really believe that, because if you worked on it like a product, you would be working on it the same way you work on your customer facing things, but instead, a lot of companies, I think, when they see a design system, even though they say, we see it as a product, I think they really do see it as a project. And that's partly why I thought it was important to figure out those distinctions, to go, these are the criteria of what a project is, and this is the criteria of what a product is. Which one matches more closely to what we're doing here? And I think it just helps us to have a more educated, informed, honest conversation when we can look at objective criteria and go, oh, you're right, we actually are treating this like a project because we have a deadline. And it's not a release. That's different than a release. We have a deadline for when this project is going to be finished. We're going to be done with design system January 2025, and then we will use said design system into infinity. It's like, well, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think there was also the article that Ben Callahan has written a while back about this. What is it called? This curve where how design systems actually become efficient over time, where in the beginning you have to invest a lot of time and effort and resources to make it work, and it's only after a certain amount of time, month, maybe half a year even, when you actually start to bear some fruit of this working practice. So I reckon that most companies coming to you, they already want to have a design system. But what would you recommend to somebody who is in a position where they may be in a small design team and they want to bring in more consistency and kind of more reusability of code and design components in the place, and they need to make a convincing argument about the design system, why do we need to invest time and effort into it? And also, how do you demonstrate success of a design system over time? How do you track it? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think those two things are related. I think what I see a lot of people do is they essentially pitch vaporware to their leadership or to the other teams. They go, if we had a design system, we would be able to save this much time, this much money, this much team, this much, we would be able to, and they have no evidence. The only thing that they can point to is, well, but Target's design system does this, and IBM's design system and Shopify's design, they point externally. Well, and I feel like that's the culture of some companies. They're always looking outward, always looking at what everybody else is doing and not focusing on what they should be doing. Instead of doing that, build something really small, and it might mean you spend a weekend, you spend a couple nights after work, working on this thing. Build a proof of concept. And not just a prototype, not just a proof of concept in a vacuum, but try to do it on live product that gets shipped. And then what you can do is you can say, we took autocomplete, right? And we implemented autocomplete with these two teams, and we saved them about a week. Now, if we had done that with 10 other components, we could save a week times 10, right? So we could save a couple of months now. That's the pitch to your leadership. You have to have something already producing results in order to convince somebody that to buy into more results like that, a scaled version of results that way. But most people pitch vaporware. They pitch, if only we had a design system, this is what could happen for us. And that's hard to invest in, right? So again, back to product, how do startups get funding? Most of them don't say, I have an idea, who will give me money to build it, right? You have to be in a very special class of people to be able to do that. For most startups, most investors will say, well, what traction have you had? You have to show traction. You have to show that, well, our email list jumped from 100 people to 1,000 people over the last 2 weeks. Well, our user base has jumped from, we had 1,000 people using it last month. Now we have 4,000 people using it this month. When investors see traction, they're much more willing to invest in it. But you have to have built something already in order to get that traction. So that's what I recommend to all the teams is like, don't pitch vaporware. Don't pitch something that you might have one day if you get the money for it, because who in the right mind would invest in that? That's just crossing your fingers and hoping. It's based on good anecdotal data, but it's still anecdotal data. Just because IBM's design system did that for IBM, that doesn't mean it's going to do that for you too. Your results will vary, your mileage will vary. So instead, build something really small in production if you can, and then pitch your leadership on and measure it, right? Like how much time did we save? How much code bloat did we save? How many less bugs did we file? There's all sorts of metrics, all sorts of good articles about what to measure, but I think it has to be measured on something that already exists. And then you have to track your before and after. And then you can go to your leadership team and say, in just 1 week of work, we saved teams 1 week of work. We basically broke even. Imagine if we did this for 3 more weeks, we would more than break even. And that's a much, much easier thing to sell. It's a much easier thing to pitch. It's much easier from a leadership standpoint to say yes to that. All right, yeah, well, I'll give you 6 more weeks. And then from 6 more weeks, then you prove more traction. Hey, can we get 12 more weeks this time? Yeah, sure. Okay. After 12 more weeks, okay, can I have 2 more engineers for the, if you're just showing traction, then I think that's going to be a much better way to get buy-in.
Mm-hmm. There's also a question that came up from Larissa. How would you recommend measuring the design system's impact specifically? For example, number of components imported, etc., or the time needed. Could you be a bit more specific about that?
So there's some short-term things that I think are worth measuring and some long-term things. So the short-term things are a lot of the quantitative stuff, right? You can, and a lot of them are before and afters. Well, actually, with almost all of these are before and afters. One thing that you can measure is how many bugs are usually filed when we're building stuff from scratch, and then how many bugs are generally filed when we use design system components. So that's one thing. You can also track product velocity, right? So you can say before we had a design system, it took us X amount of weeks to complete a feature or complete a sprint or complete a piece of functionality. Now that we have a design system, ideally it's cut down to half or a quarter or a third or something like that. So there's a lot of those things that you can track. There's a lot of good articles out there. I know Nathan Curtis has an article about, I forget what it's called, but something like metrics for design systems or OKRs for design systems, something like, he has 6 different categories of things that you can track. So those are all short-term things that you can track that are worthwhile and good data points. For me, the big one, the long-term thing to track, and it's a bit harder to track, but I think it's more impactful if you can make the case for causation there. To me, I always track retention. I always look at the people who use the design system, who make the design system, who interact with the design system team compared to people who don't. How much more turnover are there between those 2 groups? Because I think one of the things that I found, and it's certainly at a correlation stage right now, but a lot of times there is some causation between the 2. What I found is when people's work gets easier, they stick around more. So if you can make a case for the fact that your design system is actually increasing retention or reducing churn or turnover, that is a major win, because turnover is very expensive at most companies. I think to replace a particular, any given employee is something like 1.5 to 2 times their salary to replace them, plus the time that you don't have them, right? So if it takes you 8 months to search for a replacement, that's 8 months without them, plus 1.5 to 2 times salary. It is a no-brainer metric. So if you can say this design system meant that those 2 people who we thought were flight risk before are still here after 2 years, you've saved a ton of money. And so to me, that's one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for design system is if you look at how much easier it makes people's lives or makes people's work, I think that's a really good case to be made. It's harder to track in a short term. Over the long term, it's worth keeping an eye on.
Excellent. All right. There was also a note from Jarijn. Is a design system about saving money or about creating consistency, or both? Well, I guess it's both. It's more like a statement than a question, I guess.
I mean, I can respond to that because I think it's sort of both, but it's also kind of neither. I'm writing something right now. I don't know what my thesis is quite yet, so I'll just sound it out here. But one of the things that I'm writing is that efficiency and consistency, if we move them out of the realm of design systems, just talking about systems in general, efficiency and consistency are byproducts of any system. They're never the goal, right? So like if I was going to try to create a system for invoicing my clients, for example, right? That's not a design system. It's not components. It's a way that I have of doing things, which means, you know, every Friday I do this thing. I log into my QuickBooks account. I write this. I have templates that I use. I am more efficient. I'm not doing that to be more efficient. I'm doing that to make money, because if I don't invoice my clients, I don't make money. The goal is to receive money for work that I've done. The goal is not efficiency and consistency. In order to achieve that goal, I have to be more efficient and consistent, right? So it's a byproduct. So I'm not sure where we got this idea with design systems that the goal is efficiency and the goal is consistency. Well, what are those things actually getting us? Well, the goal of, or the like having a design system makes us more efficient. That allows us to do what? It allows us to help our customers pay their water bill more faster. It allows us to have our customers do something that's important to them. That's the goal, right? Design systems are supposed to serve product. To me, the hierarchy is very clear. Whatever product the company is creating, a design system should make it easier to do that thing. It's not efficiency or consistency. We do that thing. We get more efficiency and consistency by doing it that way. So I don't know. I bristle a little bit at, like, is our design systems about efficiency? Our design system about consistency? They're not about those. They're just things that come along with them. They're actually about doing the thing that your company is trying to do in a better way, and you can qualify what better means. And that's why I tend to look at more things like retention, because that's a leading indicator instead of a trailing indicator, in a way that efficiency and consistency are trailing indicators.
Very good point. Maybe one more question that came from Pavel. Do you think that having some internal design system can be useful for software house, or is it only worth in a product company?
So I said I was going to try to not say it depends. I'll say it depends. It depends on what kind of design system you're talking about, I think. Design system as a practice is a very costly endeavor, right? And I think it was Larissa who said it in the chat earlier. Like, that's the dream. If the dream is to work at a place that has a healthy, thriving design system practice, that's hard to do. It takes a lot of people. It costs a lot of time. It means a lot of involvement and alignment. Like, it's difficult. So for a non-product company, if you're an agency, if you're a startup, you know, I have a lot of people ask me, like, for a startup, should you make a design system as your first thing? And I'm like, no. How would you do that? Make a product as your first thing. Like, do that instead. Find some traction with your customers, because the design system is supposed to serve that and make that better. A design system is a way to optimize your product delivery process. If you don't have a product delivery process, or even a product, there's nothing optimized quite yet. So I think it depends what kind of design system you're talking about. So design system as a practice for a startup, probably not. Design system as tools, like a couple of UI kits and component libraries to help you make, yeah, sure, do that. That's helpful. So I think the guideline there is allow the design system to be appropriately balanced to the scale of where your company is right now, you know, of where of the maturity of your company. I just sat on a newsletter in my design system email course a couple days ago, and the topic was aligning your design org maturity to your design system maturity. Right. So if you can't have a very mature design system practice, but your design org is very immature, you know, or vice versa. You have a really mature design. I find a lot of organizations in this situation, really mature design org, you know, they have design leaders and VPs and practices and rituals and all that stuff. They don't have a design system, right? So the maturity of their design system is way more immature than their design org actually is. I think when you align those things, it's really helpful, you know, to have a design system maturity match your design org maturity. So to that question, like, is it helpful? Well, it depends what stage you're in, and whatever stage you're in, align your fidelity of design system to that level.
Well, we are almost at the full hour, so I'm wondering then, just wondering at this point, is there maybe, I don't know, any interesting resources and video courses and books and anything that you might want to recommend or suggest, or maybe you even have produced or written some on the topic? It seems like you're very close to the topic of design systems at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, if I think about it, maybe a couple resources off the top of my head, just while we're talking about it. For people who want to learn more about kind of the ecosystem and idea about design systems, I have a video course. It's about 2 hours worth of videos. It's called Make Design Systems People Want to Use. You can find all this stuff at danmall.com/products. So you can find that there. For advanced teams that are working on design system as a practice, if you're like, I know the basics, I get the idea, I just need like, what do I do? I have a workbook called Design System in 90 Days. And that walks you through 52 activities that if you were hiring me and my team, these are the things that we would do in 90 days. So here you go. That's yours. This is our playbook. You know, we wrote it because we had to write down our playbook because we were like, what are we even doing? And this is what came out of it. So available for you. You can purchase that if you want. I also, one of the things that I'm realizing lately is that those are very advanced level expensive things, and they only pay off if you are working at that level of maturity in your organization. So I'm not quite there yet, but I'm starting to just try to make more free things that are smaller and help more understand. So YouTube is one. I have a new YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/danmallteaches or /c/danmallteaches. Same thing on Instagram. So if you just want like free like nuggets every couple of days or something, you want to watch 30 seconds of something, follow me on Instagram, Dan Mall Teaches, or YouTube, Dan Mall Teaches. And I'm trying to make more and more kind of free, more bite-sized things so that you don't have to take this big chunk out. So those are some places you can start. You can contact me on any one of those places. Happy to answer questions if anybody has any more questions or interests or anything like that about design systems.
There is also LinkedIn where Dan kindly shares a lot of videos and things. Like if you want to be I would say inspired or confronted by ideas proposed by Dan about design systems, and not only design systems, you can also find him on LinkedIn, of course, as well. Then what about, this is probably something that everybody's thinking of. Should we be expecting sort of a design systems podcast from Dan Mall at some point?
It's been on my mind for a long time. I don't know what my angle is or what my thesis is yet. So I'm like, yeah, I really want to have a design system podcast. I also want it to be valuable, and I'm not sure how to make it valuable without it just being like me rambling about stuff. So I'm figuring out what the angle is. I don't mind you
rambling about design systems forever.
All right, maybe design system ramblings will be the first launch of it. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Well, I think that's it for us for now. Just for those of you who are interested, of course, Dan also runs every now and again his workshops. And again, we put a link to the resources that he has provided as well. And as Jarijn kindly reminded me, there is also a workshop with Brad Frost on design system that's coming up was it January? I think in January, it's coming up soon. So please feel free to join in as well in there. Jarijn, did I miss anything important? I always do.
You have been amazing, and you almost made up for you being a little late.
This is going to be following me now for years. I'm pretty sure about that. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. That was wonderful and precious. I'm very much looking forward to re-watch the first 20 minutes of this conversation, which I unfortunately missed. And of course, you will be able to rewatch not only the first 20 minutes, but also the last 40 minutes of these recordings as well, because we are going to put that video, once it's done, online somewhere. Where is it going to be, Jarijn?
First of all, we'll email it to everyone, and then it will be on our YouTube channel in a specific playlist, and we'll also put it on Vimeo. So pretty much anywhere on this wonderful thing called the World Wide Web.
Yes, and thank you so much for saving the day as always, Jarijn. Okay, thanks, Dan. Thanks everyone for joining, and I really hope to see you again very soon. If we don't see each other this year, have a wonderful rest of the year, peaceful, hopeful, optimistic, and energetic, I would say. Stay true to your principles and to your beliefs, and to just relaxing. Just relax a little bit. Maybe no emails, no nothing. Just be. Just be. Can you do that then? Just be.
Oh yeah, that's my plan. Thanks, Vitaly. Thanks everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye.